Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking one of the absolutely most terrifying and, frankly, deeply unsettling criminal mysteries in American history. For well over a decade, this massive, chilling shadow hung over a quiet stretch of highway along Long Island's Ocean Parkway. You probably know it as the case of the Long Island serial killer, or LISK. But today, we're not just rehashing the mystery itself. No, we are looking at the definitive conclusion that finally arrived on June 17, 2026. We're going to completely unpack exactly how a literal ghost, someone who haunted New York for a whole generation, was finally dragged into the light. We'll be looking at the facts, the timelines, and the just incredible investigative work that closed the case for good.
Okay, let's dive right into this, because the answer to the question we're asking here is literally the key that unlocked an impenetrable vault of secrets. You see, it wasn't some smoking gun or a crazy dramatic cinematic chase that brought this multi-decade mystery to an end. It was actually the most mundane, everyday object you could possibly imagine. A discarded pizza crust in a Manhattan trash can. I know, right? It sounds crazy. But to understand how investigators got to that exact pizza crust and how it brought down a monster, we really have to go back to the very beginning.
Section 1. A chilling accidental discovery and the search that uncovered a dumping ground. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer massive scale of the timeline we're dealing with here. The known disappearances of the core victims happened between 2007 and 2010, and the grim discoveries were mostly made in 2010 and 2011. But look at that final date. The conviction wasn't until 2026. This huge gap in time really grounds you in just how long this unsolved mystery absolutely paralyzed the community. It completely frustrated law enforcement. For years, the families of these victims were just stuck in this agonizing limbo, waiting for answers that honestly felt like they were never going to come.
You know, the truly dark irony of this whole case is how the investigation actually started. It was literally by accident. Back in May 2010, police were out searching for a young woman named Shannan Gilbert. She had vanished after fleeing a client's house in Gilgo Beach. And as investigators were combing through all that dense brushwood right along Ocean Parkway looking for Shannan, they stumbled onto something else. Something completely unrelated but undeniably horrifying. A serial killer's dumping ground. By the spring of 2011, this accidental search for one missing woman led them to uncover the remains of 10 different people scattered along that beach highway.
Section 2. Identifying the Gilgo 4 and the human stakes of a multi-decade mystery.
It's absolutely crucial we anchor this story in the real human lives that were lost here. At the absolute core of this massive case were 4 young women who eventually became known as the Gilgo 4. We're talking about Maureen Brainerd Barnes, who disappeared in 2007, Melissa Barthelemy, who went missing in 2009, and Megan Waterman and Amberlynn Costello, who both vanished in 2010. These women were working as online escorts, and they were found closely grouped together along the Parkway. And in what became a chilling signature of the killer, they were all found wrapped in burlap. Remembering these women, you guys, that's exactly why this breakthrough matters so profoundly, even a decade and a half later.
Moving on to Section 3, the avalanche breakthrough, and how a dark green truck finally cracked the case.
So for years, the case was just frozen cold. It was totally bogged down by institutional dysfunction and honestly local police corruption that kept federal investigators entirely at arm's length. But when a newly formed task force finally took over, they started hunting a ghost who had been hiding in plain sight the entire time. I mean, just look at this chilling duality. On one side, you have the public persona, Rex Heuermann, an imposing 6'4", 62-year-old architectural consultant commuting every single day into Midtown Manhattan from his rundown childhood home in Massapequa Park. But on the other side, the hidden reality, a highly organized sadistic killer using burner phones, doing horrific online searches, and even keeping a digital blueprint file to methodically plan out his crimes. It's like 2 completely different people.
So how exactly did the task force connect the dots to Heuermann? Well, it came down to a chain of perfectly logical, painstaking investigative steps. Step 1, the task force re-examined an old witness report from the disappearance of Amber Costello. That witness explicitly mentioned seeing a first-generation dark green Chevrolet Avalanche. Step 2, investigators tracked that very specific, pretty rare vehicle profile straight back to Rex Heuermann. So suddenly, this Manhattan architect is the prime suspect. Step 3, knowing they had to be incredibly careful with someone this meticulous, the task force started covertly tailing him, just waiting in the shadows for him to make one tiny mistake.
Section 4. DNA unmasks the killer, and the forensic trap that closed the net.
Now, what's really interesting about this next part of the story is the absolutely astonishing modern forensic science they used to finally close the net on him.
To understand the trap that caught Heuermann, we need to talk about DNA transfer. Basically, DNA transfer happens when genetic material, say a stray hair, is moved from a person to a location via an intermediary object, like a piece of clothing. Investigators used advanced forensic hair analysis and found that DNA matching Heuermann's wife was left on 3 of the victims. But here's the crazy part. His wife had an airtight alibi. She was completely out of town during every single murder window. So how on earth did her hair get there? It was transferred via Heuermann's own clothing when he committed the crimes.
So the crucial point here is how they tied Heuermann himself directly to the crime scenes. Remember that covert surveillance we just talked about? Well, while they were tailing him, investigators actually watched Heuermann toss a pizza crust into a public trash can right in Manhattan. They quietly went in, retrieved it, and extracted his DNA. And guess what? That genetic profile from the discarded crust was an absolute 100% perfect match to a male hair found directly on the burlap wrapping of Megan Waterman. Boom. With that single undeniable match, the forensic trap snapped totally shut.
Section 5. Justice and Lingering Questions. The historic 2026 sentencing and the aftermath.
Faced with just an absolutely insurmountable mountain of evidence, from the burner phones to the DNA to his own digital blueprints, Heuermann realized the jig was up. He had no way out. So he actually chose to avoid a trial entirely. On April 8, 2026, he pleaded guilty to 7 counts of murder. But wait, he also admitted to an 8th, the murder of Karen Vergata. And that admission was a massive shockwave because it extended his known timeline of serial killings all the way back to 1993. 8 lives, definitively stolen by one man over decades.
On June 17, 2026, Heuermann stood in a packed courtroom for his official sentencing. It was an incredibly heavy day. The victims' families, after literally decades of pent-up grief and fury, finally got the chance to face him directly. The presiding judge, Timothy Mazzei, completely captured the sentiment of the room, and really the whole country, with this scathing statement. He told Heuermann, "You've been described as a big man, but you are a disgusting and small man, if you're a man at all, and you're a coward."
The terms of this final resolution were absolute. Heuermann was sentenced to multiple consecutive terms of life in prison without the possibility of parole. Now, by pleading guilty, he did spare the families the agonizing ordeal of a really protracted public trial, but there was another completely fascinating component to this plea deal. Heuermann agreed to actively cooperate with the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit. Think about that. The man who spent decades meticulously hiding his own dark psychology is now helping law enforcement profile and catch other active serial killers.
So, while the June 2026 sentencing provided this definitive, historic closure for 8 families who had waited far, far too long, the work isn't fully over. Not even close. Investigators are actively reviewing other cold cases right now, keeping Heuermann's methods and his extended timeline in mind. Which leaves us with this final, genuinely chilling reality to ponder. As criminal profilers dig deeper and deeper into his past, will Rex Heuermann's true victim count climb even higher? The Long Island serial killer has been unmasked and locked away forever, but the full scope of the darkness he left behind? Well, that may still be coming to light. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will see you next time.